Named one of the Wall Street Journal's 10 best places to go in 2025, Traverse City is northern Michigan magic. Think sparkling blue waters, golden dunes, and of course, incredible food. This summer marks the debut of the Traverse City Food and Wine Festival, running August 20th through 24th. The event highlights both national and local chefs including Tyler Florence, Ji-Hae Kim, Mei Lin, and Kate Williams, and features ticketed dinners, a grand tasting tent, and wine tasting. Visit traversity.com for details. We'll see you in Traverse City in August.
It took receiving this opportunity to work on a series of plant-based cookbooks and then write my own that I realized I have already naturally embraced a lot of plant-forward and plant-based techniques into what I enjoy eating and cooking.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Eliza Barbanel. Mehreen Karim is a Brooklyn-based pop-up chef, recipe developer, and food writer. You may know her from competing on Gordon Ramsay's TV show Next Level Chef, but today she's coming back onto the show to talk about writing her debut cookbook, Make It Plant-Based Southern, and editing a larger plant-based cookbook series. I always have so much fun catching up with my friend Rini, and this episode is no exception. Also on the show, Taste contributor Vrinda Jagota stops by the studio to talk about two of her recent stories about the real-world effects of going viral: the expansive absurdist canvas of tiramisu, and Indian pizza is extremely online. Mehreen Karim, this is Taste. Thank you for coming back on the podcast.
You're welcome. How long has it been?
I should have researched this. Definitely over a year.
Right.
Certain things have changed. You're about to have a baby. That wasn't true last time you were here.
That's true.
Exactly the same, but
your hair's longer.
yeah, and you wrote a book.
These are all very important changes. I think it's been 2 years then, actually.
Yeah,
About it.
honestly, I could probably Google it in the amount of time that we've been chatting about it. But I love this era of mystery, and we'll link to the previous episode in the show notes. So if people want to revisit and find out exactly how long it's been, I guess that's one way to incentivize that. I'm really excited to talk about your first book and this larger series that you edited. But before we get into that, I'm wondering if for a little bit of context, maybe especially for the folks who didn't listen to the previous episode, if you could tell me an early food memory that you have from growing up.
Ooh, an early food memory. Unfortunately, a lot of my memories are centered around food, as are for most food people.
Fortunately, I guess.
I know. It's just so hard to narrow down obviously. I think the one thing I never share publicly, this is something I probably share in therapy more than anything, but one of the biggest fights I ever got into with my mom was when I wanted to make a fully coursed out dinner in high school for a dinner party we were having for one of my dad's colleagues, which is a big deal because my parents love hosting their non-South Asian friends and introducing them to South Asian food. But I was 15, 16, and I was like, I'm making a chicken roulade. And I don't know.
Everyone's going to like it.
Yeah, exactly. And my parents were like, what is this? They were looking at what I was cooking. And at one point, my mom started bringing out her own food. And I just remember, now in retrospect, when I think back, I'm like, oh yeah, I should have known I was going to go into food one day. Why? I sobbed all night because she brought out her own food at some point. Not that my food was bad. It's more so that this was just a huge foray. It was my first pop-up, let's say. It was my first pop-up in my mom's kitchen. And there was an appetizer, salad, main, dessert. And my mom wasn't replacing my food. She simply, there's no such thing as too much food in a South Asian dinner party household experience. So I just didn't get that. I just wanted my name on this dinner.
Not a collab partnership.
I know. Yeah, exactly. Mom, we collab every night. I always add my own food to dinner. And this was so special for me to be able to present a meal with my name on it. And yeah, I know this is a bad memory technically because it had negative feelings attached. But now when I think back to it, that's when the passion started showing up.
No, you're definitely the first person that's brought up a fight-related memory on this show, and I think we need more of that energy, actually. Like, it's so stark, and it says so much about you as a young person. Like, I feel very tenderly towards young Mehreen, who wanted to do the 4-course dinner pop-up for her parents' friends.
Thank you. Exactly. It was the first and only time I ever said I hate you to my mom.
Over chicken roulade.
Exactly.
And you guys have a good relationship today, so it all worked out.
Oh yeah, she was very, she knew that. I think maybe that's our one like deepest connection. Like she probably understood, of all the things she doesn't understand about me, this she understood that it was hurtful and bad. But yeah.
Well, I think both younger you and your mom and a lot of other people as well must feel extra proud of you for having like reached this stage in your life where not only you can do pop-ups for people that are not just your parents' friends, but you have a book out. And I've known you for, over 10 years at this point. You're my oldest friend in the city, which is, I think, so funny for people who know us as like professional acquaintances. So I'm really proud of you also.
Thank you. Yeah, it's my favorite humble brag on the way here, being able to tell the people at our publisher, like, yeah, I'm going to see Eliza. I'll just text her. She's one of my oldest friends. Don't worry about it.
I think my phone, like the photo of you in my phone, is from when we were like teenagers, probably.
Oh my,
very
gosh.
old. And it's special because, you wrote this book, but it's a part of this Make It Plant-Based series. So there's Make It Plant-Based Filipino, Indian, and Mexican that you edited, and then you did the Make It Plant-Based Southern book as well. And I want to talk specifically about the Southern book that you kind of, really worked on and developed. But I'm curious, as being the series editor for all of these books, just how it shaped your perspective on plant-based cooking, because you certainly cook a lot of plants, but you're not a strict like vegetarian or vegan.
No, I'm not. And it very much opened my eyes to how much plant-based cooking culture has existed in the South, especially in the areas I grew up in or went to college. I grew up, as you know, in northern Atlanta, and metropolitan Atlanta in general has a very diverse food scene thanks to the incredible communities that have lived there for so long. But even growing up in my college town of UGA in Athens, the hottest restaurant to get into was called The Grit, and it was a vegan restaurant. It was the cool place you take a date. It was the place you order your birthday cake from when you don't want to get some basic Kroger cake. Nothing against Kroger. I miss Kroger so dearly, but these were all experiences that seamlessly folded into my food-loving young life, and it took receiving this opportunity to work on a series of plant-based cookbooks and then write my own that I realized I have already naturally embraced a lot of plant-forward and plant-based techniques into what I enjoy eating and cooking, because also working for any sort of like food media, food magazine, and editing recipes or pitching recipes, you often have to work around a lot of ingredient parameters and dietary restrictions. Same with hosting pop-ups or designing menus for pop-ups. It just felt very natural to think critically about ingredients and specifically dietary related ingredients, and understanding the nature of whether it's produce or fats and how they can complement each other without using animal products. It was like another challenge. Like there's always a challenge when you're pitching a recipe to a magazine. There's a challenge when creating a menu for a pop-up dinner, and this was just like another one of them.
Yeah, and the last time you were on the show, we were talking about you being on Next Level Chef, the cooking competition, and
oh my gosh.
It almost feels like you took that experience and then said, okay, I want another challenge, and that's going to be developing a plant-based Southern book and working on this series.
Wow. Yeah, thanks for highlighting this pattern. That's the name of the game, is I can do hard things, right? Question mark.
Exclamation point.
Yeah, and thanks for naming the books in the series, because I think it's really it seems serendipitous that Indian food, Filipino food, Mexican food, and Southern food all have inherently native plant-based origins, actually. And each book goes into the details of these histories and why it makes so much sense for these regional cuisines to shine as vehicles for plant-based recipes, especially for beginners. That's another theme behind this series of books, is that they are meant for people who are not only quote-unquote beginner in their plant-forward, plant-based cooking, but they're beginners maybe as home cooks. That's who we're hoping to target with these books. And yeah, there's a really rich history in each of these regional cuisines that rely on specifically like seasonal produce and the nature of the land and agriculture of where these regional cuisines began. So I think that shows up in all the books, and that's kind of also how I naturally fell in love with editing them and telling the stories as I was editing the series across the board. It feels naturally cohesive.
Yeah, I think there is such a good through line, and I appreciate what you're saying about there being these indigenous food traditions that all of these kinds of regional or cultural cuisines are drawing from.
Hey, podcast listeners. I'm Chris Morocco, food director of Bon Appetit and Epicurious, and host of the Dinner SOS podcast. Each week on the show, we bring the expertise of the Bon Appetit test kitchen to your kitchen. And this season, we've got a little something for everyone. We're debating whether spring produce is actually worth all the hype, solving your hosting anxieties, and helping you become a better baker with our BA Bake Club episodes on Dinner SOS.
And I guess, like, when we're talking about plant-based, like, is that the same as vegan? Like, what are the kind of parameters for the series?
That's a great question. Actually, thanks for asking this, so I don't have to keep saying plant-based, vegan / plant-forward. Vegan, I should have Googled it before I came in, but to me, vegan just connotes that this is a strict lifestyle, and it has much more to do with almost your personhood and your political motivations. Don't quote me. I'm not saying that is the definition, but more so when I hear that someone is a vegan, it speaks to me about their moral values as well. People who just cook plant-based, or I don't know why, maybe plant-based is a rebrand that happened recently.
I feel like, to me, vegan feels like it's something you always ascribe to, whereas like plant-based could be that you are eating without animal products for dinner, but maybe not all of the time. Like I feel like it's more of a vague term, and that is used in different ways. So it's vague, and that means that like food media can deploy it and have it feel more quote unquote like welcoming. Or I could say I eat plant-based, and if you see me eating like Thanksgiving turkey, you're not going to be like, what are you doing? I thought you were vegan, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the most popular coffee drink is plant-based because it's oat milk, right? But we're not going around saying like, oh, what's the plant-based menu at blank street or something like that.
So for these books, it's not vegetarian, it's fully vegan. So there's no like butter or dairy, etc.
Yeah, everything is written with plant-based / vegan butters, fats, binders. Like instead of eggs, there's flax eggs and things like that involved. And then it just goes a few steps further to prioritize the ingredients from each cuisine, which also happen to be inherently plant-based.
Yeah. So I think Southern food specifically, like what kind of Southern food did you grow up eating in Georgia, and how did you kind of approach like what your take on plant-based Southern cuisine would be?
That was the most annoying question for myself to answer, because having lived in Georgia up through age 22, 23, and then now I'm amounting to almost 7 years in New York, I was starting to get to this crossroads where I realized I'm stereotyping the South almost. And thank God I visit often enough, and my older brother, who I stay with whenever I go to Georgia, his wife is also extremely Southern, like through and through, more than I ever will be. And I actually learned so much through her and her family and a lot of the adult experiences I've had since I've left the South. So a lot of this book is a reflection on what I used to know, which was very limited, and what I know now, which is actually much more colorful. And so, like, one of the most interesting takeaways I think I found is the random food memories, we're going back to this, that were probably handed to me or translated to me from, I don't know, like other families we grew up around, and not realizing that these express a lot more about Southern cooking than the vegan fried chicken sandwich in the book. So, for example, there's a kale porridge recipe in here, and that doesn't immediately read Southern to people, and it's not exciting or sexy either. But that recipe was made for me all the time by my best friend in college. Her mom would make this soup for us whenever we were sick, and she would send it home. And it was so creamy, and I didn't love kale back then. I didn't love soup back then either, but it was so delicious. And I didn't realize until a few years later when I started making it for myself as an adult, it's just made creamy with rice, arborio rice. And it had like a little bit of garlic in it, and it was blended with the kale, and it becomes this really umami forward dish that I think my best friend's mom learned to make from a Southern Home and Living magazine at some point in her last 30 years of living in Georgia. So with things like that, it makes me realize that so many recipes are passed down, not even just through generations of families, but other people consuming their own version of food media in their own personal histories, and then me just being a natural recipient from living there.
Yeah, and I think there's like certainly like the classic your take on a chicken sandwich, which is using mushrooms instead. And also I think like it would be hard to do a Southern book and not do a biscuit as part of it. But, you know, I struggle to make biscuits with normal butter. So when I saw that you were doing a vegan biscuit, I was really intrigued, and I was curious like what that development process was like for you, if that was a challenge or if you found that using plant-based butter was just kind of a one-to-one with any other biscuit recipe.
It was really scary. Yeah. I was frightened. I'm similar to you. I will only laminate things if I have to for a recipe development project, or if I just really want homemade pie, I don't know. But yeah, to laminate biscuit dough, especially with plant-based butter, as you mentioned, is very scary. But thankfully, there are a few precautionary methods you can just be strict about. And if you are strict about them, it's pretty hard to fail. And even failing when making a biscuit will probably just look like your butter melted too fast at some point. Either your butter melts fast when you're making the dough, or your butter melts fast in the oven. And therefore not enough steam releases to allow the biscuit to rise and create flaky layers. So my recipe, and not just the recipe, there's even a 2-page spread after the recipe to help readers prepare for a biscuit making process. There's a section about how we treat the butter, and then there's a section about how to go about cooling your biscuit dough along the way. And it seems really excessive because I'm essentially asking you to refrigerate the bowl of your ingredients every time you add something to it. Because I just want to make sure. I don't know how hot your hands are.
Yeah.
I don't know how hot your kitchen is. I think in Claire Saffitz's book, Dessert Person, she says at the beginning in her preface that what people get wrong about baking is that they say it's a science, and that assumes that you're working in a laboratory, and you're not. So even if you have a recipe that's written scientifically, we're not operating in labs like scientists do. So this assumption that all the tested variables are going to work out the same is completely untrue for baking, and we need to stop having that assumption about home bakers as well. So that's why I have this guide about like how to build a better biscuit. And like I said, there's one section about how to keep your dough chilled so that the butter doesn't melt, or if you have like really warm hands or a warm countertop, that doesn't affect it. And then there's a section about the different size of like the pieces of butter that go into it to make sure that let's say it is a little warm or like you do overwork your dough, there's 2 different sizes of butter pieces in the biscuit dough. Some are like flat shards and then some are grated so that there's just more opportunity or more chance for success.
Yeah. Yeah. I think reading it, I felt very held and like that it would work out for me. And also I just it was really evident that there was a lot of care that had gone into that development process. I'm curious if that was like the most difficult to perfect recipe in the book, if there was another moment that you like had to spend a lot of time and care on.
Ooh, I think the mac and cheeses.
Really?
Yeah, I wanted to not put in mac and cheeses, honestly, because I wanted to somehow create this book and be like, like I didn't force you to make a mac and cheese that is less creamy than a true cheese-filled dish, you know? Like I don't even want to put an option out there. But there are really good vegan mac and cheese recipes out there in general, and there are people who have mastered that. So when I was working with our editor to figure out how to both balance traditional and like expected Southern recipes, which is mac and cheese, we did decide to put them in. And I think I wanted to say something about mac and cheese that wasn't just like, here's how you replicate the taste of creamy cheese. That's why there's a French onion mac and cheese in there.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah, and it helps a lot. It helps a lot to like have a blend of like concentrated caramelized onions as a part of your sauce, because that's what makes that recipe a win rather than just trying to replicate a recipe that already exists. And then the Ritz crusted classic mac and cheese bake also relies on a cashew cream, but my cashew cream also has silken tofu in it. So those were just hard for me to decide that I felt proud of what the recipes had to offer. I'm like really not interested in trying to repeat what other recipe developers have already said or proven about dishes, specifically plant-based mac and cheese, because there are so many people, especially in the South. There's a huge pre-existing culinary culture of Southern vegan soul food.
Yeah.
And I just did not want to go near that or like try to replicate something that's already been perfected.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And another mac and cheese style recipe in the book that I thought was really cool was this pimento cheese pasta, where you're essentially making pimento cheese with silken tofu and then, bell pepper and sweet turmeric and paprika and all of those kind of other spices. Like pimento mac and cheese is something that's common and I've just been missing out my whole life. But I saw that and I immediately was like, oh, this is really smart, because you're using this such like an adaptable ingredient like tofu and you're able to give it so much character and kind of like make up for the fact that it's not cheese.
Exactly. No, I'm glad that was noticed. And you know what? That's funny. That's not in my head. That's not one of the 2 mac and cheese recipes.
Is it not technically? Like it's not.
It is. I guess I have 3 mac and cheese recipes in here, I guess. But that one's just not formally titled as such. But that is pasta and a cheese of some sort. But I'm glad that's recognizable and feels valuable to the reader.
Yeah. I also really liked the dessert section. I mean, I'm just a dessert person, and you have 3 or 4 different kinds of pies and like hand pies and all of those things. And I feel like similarly to biscuits, like those are like a good pie dough traditionally has like that kind of really buttery feel and everything. But it seems like you had a lot of fun kind of coming up with what kinds of sweet treats you wanted to put in at the end of the book.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's often what I'm most proud of when I think of Southern cuisine, are the desserts. And I think Southern home cooking makes up for a lot of what people associate with just American home cooking at times. When we think of home cooked food, we unknowingly refer to Southern food. And that shows up a lot in this recipe section as well, like a chocolate cream pie, cobblers, etc. I have a whole essay about casseroles, also like casserole culture and how that's a big deal in the South, and that's like something you think of. But yeah, the idea of a cobbler to me, like that's also that's a fruit casserole essentially. And all of that it felt very natural to develop these recipes.
Yeah. When you were kind of working on developing the book, did you have a plan of attack in terms of developing certain sections one at a time, or how did you kind of handle bringing a whole book's worth of recipes together?
Ooh, no, I think I had to first write out recipe ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So they were all very nebulous, and then I started drawing circles around them. Like, what is it? What recipes share something? What recipes don't? That's when I realized that, like, okay, soups and stews in general, or like these just like larger form items that you bring somewhere to share, deserve their own space and chapter. That was not a decision I made preemptively. That was something that happened after recognizing the amount of recipes that were large pot and shareable.
Yeah. That's how the casserole section came to life.
Right, exactly. That's why I wanted a casserole essay. It's just, by the way, whatever we think about casseroles, I think that is seen also as like a nuclear family sort of recipe trend, like a TV dinner or like a casserole is on the table.
Yeah, or like someone is sick and so you show up with the casserole at their door.
Someone died, you bring a casserole.
Yes.
But it could also just be that you want to use your 9x13 baking dish and make a really straightforward recipe that just comes together in one dish. And yeah, I appreciate that I got to see the shapes of Southern dishes from my imagination after listing them out.
So you were like editing these books ostensibly around the same time that you were writing your own. Did you have any like light bulb moments or ideas or tweaks come up because you were editing these other plant-based books while you were making one?
It's so funny. So basically the way this worked is that I would be exactly 1.5 steps ahead of the other 3 authors in developing my book. So,
okay.
Yeah, and it's so I was almost the guinea pig in I'm going to write my book proposal and table of contents draft first, get it all edited, tightened up, see what that process is like, and then apply that process as their editor to theirs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it trickled down the opposite direction.
Right, exactly. It was almost like I was throwing mine at the wall first to see what stuck, and then having a better understanding every time I worked on their books. And yeah, I think it was just very helpful to know what it felt like for me to get edited and understand what it was that I had intended versus what was working or potentially might not work, what's worth advocating for, and then being able to understand the ethos and intentions of the authors as well. And these cuisines are so different from one another, and thankfully I think that shows up in the formats of their books as well. So every book has about 50 to 60 recipes, some more than others, and each book is organized so differently, similar to mine. Like mine has a whole section on sauces, but that's not the same for the plant-based Mexican book. Instead, Andrea, her book, has an entire section on nixtamalization and corn and masa. There's a whole masa chapter because that's one of the most integral parts of plant-based Mexican cuisine in its indigenous nature. And I think that's really incredible. Like that's an ingredient-driven chapter.
Yeah.
And I think she knew that going into writing this book that she needed to have that. So we knew to advocate for that from the very beginning. But that's just an example. Yeah,
I think it's really cool because it's an exercise in like similarity and also dramatic differences. And the result is a series of books that someone could buy or give to someone, and you could, be focused on this mission of eating more in a plant-based way, but having that be expressed in very different ways.
Yes, exactly. I think everyone got to be really honest about how they cook day to day at home and translate that into a book for beginners who maybe want to learn more about Mexican cooking. And they just happen to also not want to eat more meat or dairy or anything like that.
Yeah. I want to talk about the aesthetic of the book also, because I think it's really beautiful. You have these great photos that Emma Fishman shot, and I think so many people, including myself, decide what they want to make in a cookbook largely based on the photos that stick out to them the most.
Right.
I was curious what that process was like, if you were on set, involved with the styling, and just kind of how it felt to see the book come to life in that kind of way.
Right. That's also so funny. I remember one of my first times hanging out with you in New York was with Emma. You and her were shooting Nowadays or something.
Yes, because I worked with Emma when I was at Bon Appetit many years ago. That is so funny.
That was one of my first, I think that was the first time I ever met Emma. And then we realized she's from Atlanta too. Anyway, sorry.
And then you guys do a project together. Yeah.
Exactly. Then she's shooting my cookbook. That was wild. It was really beautiful to see how much detail went into the planning and how much they can produce and cook on a cookbook shoot. I think that was shocking to me. And to see how elegant each photo turns out, knowing that there's a fast-paced team just feet away from the backdrop and box lights and everything. It's really insane to see it all in the book now, because so much goes into making sure that every element of every recipe is accounted for, prepared. To me, that's one step above cooking at a restaurant, is cooking for, food styling and the work that goes into that. So one, it was impressive to be on set for that, because my only experience with that previously was seeing recipes be shot at Bon Appetit. And then on top of that, I loved that styling was very, very intentional. And, we had to create really intentional shot lists with details of what elements can be on set, what elements cannot be on set. There were specific cultural implications that certain authors didn't want to make. So they didn't want to see certain textiles. They wanted to make sure that maybe there's a recipe that is never eaten with a utensil. Please do not have a utensil on set for that. I think most of the authors got to be there on set for each of the books. I was there for most of mine. And then I wanted each author to have that same relationship with their shoot. So it didn't make sense for me to be there for all of the books. But yeah, it's lovely to see this lean towards what I would call a patinaed / vintage feel to the way the dishes are plated, and even I think the way the photos are color graded.
Yeah, I think it looks very timeless in a sense that it's not hyper trendy in a way of some of the books that we've seen this year, but it also doesn't feel dated to me. It just feels like it's suspended in time.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of the textures and the styling involved and the props were timeless.
So I'm curious, after, I feel like these books are made and then there's this whole end to the process and then they finally come out into the world. At this stage in the book process for your book and this whole series, do you think that your home cooking has been impacted at all by working on all of these books?
I have to laugh. Yes, my husband has never cooked more than he's cooked in the last 2 years.
Yeah,
for me while working on these, because I was also pursuing these while doing pop-ups.
Yeah.
So I was burnt out in 2 different ways, and it's funny because I was so tired. We were eating so many more plant-based ingredients. Namely tofu. We have so much tofu pasta at home in general. It's one of our go-to meals, is just blending up tofu into a sauce and throwing that over cooked pasta. I mean, it's much more delicious than that sounds. But
it sounds good.
Yeah, that's why we make it. It's an Alfredo-ish pasta.
Yeah.
Similar to the pimento cheese pasta, as you were saying. So it's funny because we're leaning towards canned ingredients and the pantry more often. And sometimes, I mean, obviously I still eat meat and I share that to my social media and whatnot. And my pop-ups aren't always plant forward, more plant based. But my home cooking has definitely been impacted by, one, the things I've learned from editing all the different books, and 2, just wanting to be as low lift as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think there's another reason that might be impacting your desire to do that. And that is that you have another big collab project on the way, which is a baby, which is so exciting. And like, I guess I was curious if you feel like you had any like pregnancy cravings that were impacting the food that you were cooking, or if you think this idea of like knowing that you are going to have another person to be cooking for in the future has kind of been making anything percolate for you.
You know, I don't know what I would have done if I was developing the recipes at the same time as I had most of my cravings, because these recipes were all developed a year and a half ago, so
Yeah.
right before.
And did you even have
Essentially.
did you have pregnancy cravings?
No, I always have cravings. So that's the thing
Right.
I've learned
It's normal.
recently. Yeah, like I'm going to wake up wanting what I want to eat and I'm going to eat it. And that hasn't changed.
And that's that.
Yeah, and that's that. What it has opened my eyes up to, getting pregnant has opened my eyes up to the fact that, one day I'm going to have to think critically about how I feed a child and how I introduce food to them and basically form their food psychology in relationship with food. And there's so much science out there about power dynamics when it comes to like feeding a child and
like you're gonna eat this.
yeah, like all of that we've all been really effed up, I think, by some traditional feeding cultures or like things that are normal to do. Like feeding a baby with an airplane spoon is like not the right thing to do. But that being
What's
said,
an airplane? Like
when
here's
you're like
the air-
open your mouth,
You're not supposed to do that?
No. Because babies are supposed to experience the textures and flavors of foods like play.
So they're supposed to use their little hands.
Yes, they're supposed to make a giant mess. But what I'm trying to say more of is also that looking at the recipes in this book and the idea of having a kid that might have allergies. My nephew, who's 1.5 now, and I cook for him when he comes over. My niece and nephew, whenever they come play with us, I have to think really critically about putting eggs and dairy. He's been vegan for the first year of his life, actually. And so I actually learned so much from developing these recipes and how to cook for him. And watching parents have to relearn everything they know about food to make food for their children makes me so sad. Because it becomes like a second job on top of becoming a parent. And so I feel really lucky that I'm kind of equipped now with the general knowledge to hopefully not feel so stressed if I have a child with food allergies or like if there are any restrictions I need to make, or the general practice of like going into my pantry not having much to cook but still finding a way to make something tasty. That's also what this book kind of celebrates as well. Like when you think you don't have much going on, if the back of your fridge has like really old miso and you have like a can of beans, you're actually quite set. And yeah, I feel prepared now to take on the adventures of feeding maybe a very picky kid or maybe a sick kid, whoever it is, because of editing these recipes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is so surreal also to be promoting a book at the same time that you're like preparing to embark on a very different chapter of your life.
I am straddling so many parts of my brain, and I like to be consolidated. Like I want my purpose every day to feel contained by like a theme or that, I don't know. Maybe it's like my inability to multitask or focus, but if I don't feel convicted in what it is I'm doing 100%, then I'll stop. I like won't do anything. And I'll find out what it is I want to be saying or doing. And yeah, it's now that I'm focusing on promoting the book, I forget that I have a baby. There's a 5-pound child inside me. And
yeah, that's surreal that you can forget. But I think, I don't know, I don't have kids myself, but it seems to be that the mentality is like, it always is going to be a yes and, right? Like you have this project of motherhood and then you have all these other projects, professional, personal at the same time.
Exactly. There's so many people out there that naturally blend the two that I look up to. Like right now, I I look at Sola, who recently birthed a child.
Yeah, actually, her delivery date and her book pub date were also like a month apart.
I need advice.
Yeah.
I need to reach out. And then Emily Mariko on TikTok, like
Of the like salmon bowl fame.
of
yes.
the salmon bowl fame. Yeah, I think watching them two just continue to be the food personalities they always were, and then there's a baby in tow, and then it influences some of the things they say and do. I don't know. Whatever balance they have going on from the outside, at least, seems really ideal to me, and I hope to strike it one day.
Yeah, well, if you need a babysitter along the way, you know I'm on call.
Yes, please.
Okay, I want to play a little rapid fire lightning round with you to close.
Okay, yes.
Favorite recipe in Make It Plant-Based Southern right now?
The pancakes.
The thing that you're bringing to the picnic?
Dessert. Specifically cookies.
Cookies. Are you making them or are you buying them at the bodega?
I'm making them.
Sorry, I would buy them at the bodega.
No, you wouldn't?
Yes, I would.
Wow. I don't know you.
What kind of cookie? Chocolate chip?
No, depending on the season. I actually really like making cookies with jam, strawberry jam.
Oh, yeah. I like those. Your go-to ice cream flavor to order?
Anything akin to a chocolate brownie or a chocolate cake, specifically Brooklyn Blackout ice cream.
Your favorite bakery in New York?
Libre for the pain au chocolat.
Your favorite, like, special occasion restaurant in New York?
Llama Inn for lomo saltado.
Your go-to late-night snack?
This is actually my snack constantly throughout every day of the last year, string cheese. And I just had some at 3 a.m. last night when I couldn't sleep.
How do you eat the string cheese?
I bite it.
Really?
I'm a pragmatist. I don't want it getting under my nails, and I chomp it. And yeah, my husband gets mad at me every time I do it.
I'm so glad I asked this follow-up. It's the hard-hitting questions here. 2 condiments that you would bring, like, on a desert island?
Spicy pepper jelly, which there is a recipe for in my book. So pepper jelly is spicy. Just to clarify for people, usually it's fruit-based and then has some sort of chili in it that makes it spicy and sweet. And then, the second one, mayonnaise.
Preferred brand?
I mean, sure, Kewpie mayonnaise often, but I don't like Kewpie mayonnaise on things that I don't want to taste eggy. So sometimes on tuna salads, I don't like Kewpie mayonnaise. On bread, sometimes I don't like it.
This is like the real Southerner in you coming out with the different mayos for different situations.
Wait, thank you for saying that because I don't like Kewpie mayonnaise on tomato toast.
Oh, do you do like Duke's, Hellman's, something else?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, anything else because the egginess is emphasized with like the sweetness of the tomato. I can smell the egg in the Kewpie. This isn't an attack on
Stop
Kewpie.
talking about this because I don't like eggs, but I like Kewpie mayo, and I'm worried that now I'm going to not get this out of my head.
Yeah, you're going to smell it next time. And I wrote, like, one of my first stories for BA was, like, a deep dive on Kewpie mayo. And I'm its biggest fan, but, again, I'm really picky.
Okay, I'm changing the subject for my own good. Final question. A fictional food scene, like from a book or a movie, that you wish you could eat in real life?
Oh, my gosh. I mean, obviously, the typical answer is like these Studio Ghibli movies. In Ponyo, there is I don't eat ham. I don't eat pork. And there is a ham sandwich scene where Ponyo, who's like a little fish that turns into a girl, eats it for the first time. And it just looks like the most like salty slab of cured meat. And she like chomps into it and you can tell it's springy.
Yeah.
I loved cured meats, I think, in general. So like bologna was a huge part of my life growing up. I think that's what I feel when I see that scene is like, I want my childhood bologna sandwich.
Well, now I'm going to be thinking about that for a long time. Mehreen, thank you so much for coming on this show. This was so much fun, and congratulations on the book series.
Thank you so much, Eliza.
Brenda Jagota, this is Taste. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I know it's really fun for us to get to talk in person because I feel like normally it's like a Word doc editing email-based relationship, which is so much less fun.
I know. Yeah, I'm so happy to. Yeah, it's great to be here. And I feel like we've worked on so many different kinds of stories together too. So it's like a very active Google Docs like friendship, and then to be here is really nice.
Or in real life, I feel like I'm kind of getting away with something because I don't know how much you would have identified as like a food writer a couple of years ago, but because you wrote something for me for Cake Scene that was like Trojan horse music food story, I feel like I've kind of been bringing you over a little bit.
No, that's exactly it. That's like I'm primarily a food writer. I worked at Pitchfork for a number of years, and I did social there, but I also wrote for them. And I have been doing music writing for forever. But then with you, I wrote that one music food story, and then since then we've been working on food stories, which has been really fun for me.
The story for Cake Scene, which I guess I'll just say in brief because it is such a funny Trojan horse, was for the humble pie issue that we did about pie and humility and humiliation. And do you want to maybe say briefly what that story was?
There's this venue in DC that called Pie Shop that puts on like punk shows, actually all kinds of shows, and they also sell pie, and they sell like pie inspired by Girl Scout cookies, and then like savory pies, like a Irish, I forget what it was, some kind of like Irish pie. And so it's just like this really cool place. So I interviewed one of the people who runs it.
Yeah, and it was this idea that like they're an indie music space. They probably wouldn't be able to keep the rent up and like keep their doors open on their own, but because they're also selling pie, they have this second revenue stream that keeps them going, which I love because I feel like I go to shows here all the time in New York and there's never good snacks at the venue.
I agree. Yeah. And something that I just like, I like this like kind of contrast between like intense, like, you know, punk music or like a DIY venue, and then like the kind of whimsy of pie, and just knowing that like people want both and people contain multitudes. And, you know, I thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah. And I feel like it was mostly about like the humble pie thing was like, this is kind of like a humble place that's using pie to support itself. But I feel like we didn't really get into this, but I would think that like DIY scene, there is this weird like pie association. Like when I was growing up in LA, I would go to a lot of DIY shows, also very much in like the kind of biking community where people would like cycle around, and there would always be like a random vegan pie or something.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe, well, I think the vegan element is definitely part of it. I feel somehow it's like, I don't know, like something about a cake. I don't know. I personally just like as a home baker really struggle with making a vegan like buttercream, for example, like for a cake. I think it would be easier to make a vegan pie. But also like something about like a pie, I think it has this kind of like humility associated with it where a cake can feel, and especially the way we're like the kind of cake trend of like those Marie Antoinette cakes that have been really big for the last few years feel really decadent, whereas a pie feels much more like earthy and like solid, your grandmother's recipe, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're here to talk about like two stories that you've done for Taste that I think are both kind of on this really interesting beat of maybe like internet food trends that are rooted in real life implications. And I feel like as an editor, I'm kind of like allergic to people will often pitch me and be like, this TikTok trend, like, and it's just something that's happening online. And I feel like it doesn't actually connect to reality. But I think your recent tiramisu story really kind of hits on both of those things. And I was wondering if you could just kind of tell me a little bit about like where that idea came from and how you would kind of describe the thrust of this piece, which we've titled The Expansive Absurdist Canvas of Tiramisu. Yeah.
So the idea for the story started a few years ago, actually, when I was just online looking through my like reels or whatever. I kind of noticed like different iterations of tiramisu recipes popping up, like a limoncello one and a matcha one, and I was just saving them because I was noticing this trend, and I was like, it didn't feel like a story at the time. It just felt like a little bit of a trend. Like maybe this is what you're talking about, where it's like this one thing is trending, but it didn't feel at the time like there was something broader.
There isn't like a why.
There isn't a why. Yeah. So I literally have like a folder on my Instagram, like saved of all these tiramisu videos from 2023. And I just was like, let me just sit on this until something else happens with this. And then when I really started paying attention was like a few months ago when the Yankees like announced that they were selling tiramisu in their like helmets, and I'm like,
Which, to be clear, like miniature,
yeah, miniature helmets.
miniature helmets.
I'm like so not a sports person that I didn't realize that like that's a thing they do. You know, it's like a miniature helmet, and it's like they've done it with ice cream for a while and stuff. So I was just like shocked by that. I was like, what is going on? So I kind of started doing research into like. And people were also kind of thought it was funny and were writing bits about it, you know, like little pieces about it. So that was like what really caught my attention, where I was like, wow, tiramisu is really like having this moment. So then I just started kind of doing some research, and I was like, wow, it's like, it's not just, you know, it's not just the Yankees. It's also like Lindt made a tiramisu flavor, and there was this viral like tiramisu brownie recipe. And then also I was like, it made me also realize I had been seeing it on like people making weird, surreal TikToks using tiramisu.
Yeah, this is where I kind of fixated on this, and I apologize because I've sent you like a million videos that fall into this format of people making tiramisu in unexpected vessels. But I think the first one I saw was someone who made tiramisu in a city bike basket, but it was like a tractor truck bed or a bathtub, all of these kind of like, why would you put tiramisu in that kind of thing? And in the piece, you kind of go down this rabbit hole of like, where did this come from? And it actually came from a restaurant with a very real purpose.
Yeah, that's also been so fun to like trace back like where the trend came from. And also in the process to see how we got to this place. So it started with Onda, which is a restaurant in Manchester in the UK. And at the time, in 2023, they were a pop-up. And so they were just kind of they just like wanted to make their lives easier, you know? So they like did what is a common restaurant practice of like prepping ingredients, having it in a drawer or whatever, but they did it with a full tiramisu. And they had this tiramisu drawer that they brought to like wherever they were serving food. And then one of the people who runs the restaurant isn't the chef, and he made that distinction because he said it gave him this insight into this practice being a little unusual. Like he just saw the chef using it and was like, huh, that's like weird to do for a full ready-made tiramisu. And he posted it on their TikTok, and it just like blew up in 24 hours basically.
Yeah, and it's from this place of you want to have tiramisu prepped for dinner service, so you can just scoop it out, and if you put it on a drawer into a fridge, then it's just easy. But I think when you post the video of it, then everyone is like fantasizing about what they would do if they had a drawer full of tiramisu in their homes.
Exactly. Yeah, so that was the start of it, because it was, and tiramisu had already been kind of like having this cultural moment around that time, and that's something that Patty, that's the owner of Onda, co-owner, that's what he was saying too. Like people were making it. People were making those like iterations on reels, and so people had a sense of familiarity and interest in it. But then what they presented was something pretty new. So it was like this mix of familiarity and kind of newness.
Yeah, and then I think the most natural progression was some creators started taking the like produce drawer in your fridge that you would put oranges in and filling that with tiramisu, and then it just got crazy. And something that you did in the piece that I really appreciated was you really went into like how much of this is actually tiramisu, like in these kind of fantastical servings. And it seems like there maybe is some kind of like Hollywood movie magic going on.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So from the fridge drawer, it's now like, as we were talking about, it's become, it's now in city bikes, it's in tractors, it's in like really weird places. But I spoke to a content creator who she said, well, she didn't want to like say this for sure, but she thinks she's the first person to do the city bike tiramisu. She's like, I don't know.
Should you be proud?
I know. She's like, I don't know. Don't get me on the record saying this, but but the way she explained her process is like there's kind of like almost a false bottom, like it's like a kind of a tiny amount of it, and you just kind of you put that little container into the bigger container, and you like just spread the whipped cream around the edges, so it kind of looks like the whole thing is filled with tiramisu, but it's not. It's actually very easy to clean, and she says she eats it like the little amount she eats with her friends. So there's no like food waste.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious like what you think of the reception of these videos, and if you think that's impacted the way that like people are maybe seeking out tiramisu in, restaurants, like places where you would normally receive it. Because I think sometimes when things go viral, like there's a negative, there's like, this is wasteful, or like there's like a backlash.
Yeah, that's a good point. I feel like It's interesting because if I think of it now, like the way that those videos are being made is just gross. Like it's like it doesn't. I don't know that but these videos have really picked up maybe in the last few months. But before that, what we were talking about with like the fridge video, or like the fridge drawer, I think that does kind of incite a sense of like desire or like wanting the tiramisu, because that was the kind of comment that was being made all the time then, was like, this is how much tiramisu I want, this on my bedside table, like this is how much I want. Like,
Yeah.
it was all about indulging and like kind of this way of being like, I love dessert, like I love tiramisu. And I think it built up a sense of hype, and then that huge outsized amount of desire like plunged into this like weird, surreal, kind of disgusting realm.
Yeah, you talk about this duality in the piece. I think it's like something along the lines of everything is tiramisu and tiramisu isn't everything. So, you can be doing matcha tiramisu or experimenting with flavors, or you can be experimenting with the container that it's held in. But I think the core driving fact behind both of those is that like tiramisu is delicious and not that hard to make. And so it's a very like accessible trend for people to get on board with, as opposed to a princess cake, for example, that has all of those layers and the homemade marzipan and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. I think at the end of the day, it's like just it's like almost a tabula rasa. It's a dessert that most people can conceive of making and can also kind of imagine the way it tastes. They're familiar with it. But at the same time, it's like not, it still has a sense of like kind of maybe humble luxury to it. It still feels exciting. It still feels like something you might get on your birthday or whatever, something like that,
And going back to Onda, the like tiramisu drawer heard around the world, it kind of revolutionized their business.
Yeah. That, which is really crazy. They were able to, as soon as the video went viral, they were like kind of booked out for the next like 9 months or something, they said. And it was like when they got all those bookings, they felt so confident in their business that they were like, we can start a brick and mortar like store. And they've been running that since then. And Patty told me that like 2 or 3 times a week someone comes in to order, like it's still going strong to order the tiramisu. Sabrina Carpenter just came in to try it. So yeah.
That's so crazy.
I know.
They have to do like the kitchen tour where you can see the drawer as part of the service now.
Literally. I think so. I think people do come to like see the drawer.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of the other piece you wrote for Taste recently, which is called Indian Pizza is Extremely Online, which is also kind of tracing this virtual trend that's been impacting business for people. And I guess, can you tell me about like what would you define as Indian pizza, and like when was the first time you encountered that?
Okay, so Indian pizza in India is really crazy, and is the first way that I consumed it was like today you can get it with like momos in the crust. That's like so wild. Yeah. And like you go to an Indian pizza place and it like feels really fun, and it feels like a kind of an event to go. Same thing with like if you go to McDonald's in India, it feels really fun. Like people have birthday parties there, that kind of thing. So it's like a slightly different vibe. So that was how I first encountered it. And then the phenomenon of Indian pizza in America, I really got into through a viral video at this place called Pizza Twist that I was like just really fascinated by. And I think that's how I first pitched it to you. I was like, oh, like look at this crazy video, and you're like, oh, like let's talk about Indian pizza a little more broadly.
Yeah, and I think it is a fool's errand to try to describe memes or viral videos without showing them. But I do kind of want you to maybe briefly venture to describe like what was the video and maybe what about it was so compelling to you, because I think we all are consuming a lot of over the top absurdist content online all the time, but it doesn't necessarily stick out.
Yeah. So the specific video that stuck out to me was there's like this guy on like kind of on one knee, like proposing to this woman or asking her out on a date or whatever. And he has this like bag on his head, which is like strange. So that caught my attention immediately. And I think a lot of creators are trying to catch your attention in the first 3 seconds. That's like a big part of what gets a video boosted in the algorithm. So sometimes they'll do something like weird visually like that, and you're like, what's going on? So anyway, so he's like proposing to this woman, and she's like, ew, no, like stay away from me. And then he takes off the bag, and he like unzips his coat. Or no, he never takes off the bag. He just unzips his coat, and you realize he works at Pizza Twist. And she's like, oh my God. She unzips her own coat. She also works at Pizza Twist. So I don't even know why she's so impressed, but she is. And she's like, oh my God, let's go on a date. Like, pizza twist? That's amazing. And then he's like, no. And then he's back. He's like behind in the kitchen. He's like chopping vegetables. And then like Drake starts playing. And it's kind of like this thing of like, you didn't want me when you didn't know who I was. And now you know I work at Pizza Twist and I don't want you.
And he has this pizza that has like paneer and onion and cilantro and chili and all these delicious things on it.
Yeah.
That's the video.
Yeah, that's the video. And it's it really caught my attention because I thought it really like was a bizarre and like interesting kind of like mixture of what I had seen on like Indian social media of like this trope of like I'm going to ask you out and you don't realize how cool, you don't realize how secretly handsome I am and you're going to say no and then you're going to regret it. And it's like this weird like trope. And then I saw it applied to an American context. You see Drake, you see the pizza. And like, I just thought it was this really perfect fusion of different social media kind of memes and tropes. And that's what caught my attention at first.
Yeah. And then when you actually went to Pizza Twist and talked with the powers that be, they're having like real financial success off of these viral videos. And I think that's the editor in me, that's the part where I'm like, this is clearly translating into something. What exactly it's translating into is the point of the story to kind of expand upon in the same way that you're talking about what is Indian pizza as a cuisine, how has it been evolving and changing, like who is the audience for Indian pizza in the same way as who is the audience for these videos.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that I kind of grapple with. Like, I think on one hand, these videos like really allow, and I think it's a trend that's happening with a lot of like POC run restaurants right now are making like meme or like surreal videos to show off their restaurant. And I think in a way it allows them to like, I think people, I interviewed like Khushbu Shah for this and what she said, what I thought was great was like people are becoming more adventurous eaters because people aren't just static. Like they can be influenced by this kind of content and influenced to try things that they might not like walk by Pizza Twist. They might not go in if they're walking by it, but if they see this video, they might be influenced. So that's one element of it. But at the same time, I do like kind of wonder about who the audience is for these videos. I think like I when I spoke with the people who make the videos, they were talking about knowing that like some of it is intentionally cringy and knowing that they're going to get hate comments. And in a way, almost like farming for those. And so I don't think that's all of it, but I think that's part of it. And I do consider like, is this in any way like a weird performance to incite like kind of hate comments or something? And how is that like a weird performance of otherness or a weird racial performance? And is that a net positive thing or not? Like on the one hand, you're making people aware of your restaurant. But on the other hand, like, do you have to do that in a way that's like cringy or weird?
Yeah, I think maybe it speaks to this larger digital phenomenon, which is like good or bad views are more views. And especially like when there's so much general food content happening online these days, like maybe the way to break through that algorithm is if you make something that is just so unusual or unexpected that you can reach an audience that otherwise wouldn't receive it. Exactly.
And I think like what I just realized really working on the tiramisu piece too was that, you know, when you're making content online and that's the main way you're consuming it, like it's obvious when you say it, but it's like you can't taste it, you can't smell it. So the experience of eating the food comes second to every other thing that the food represents.
Yeah. I think the other thing that's interesting is it's showing the staff as the stars of the video, which when I worked at Bon Appetit in, 2018, 2019, like the big era of the Test Kitchen YouTube channel, that was totally based around having the employees be the stars and having people feel like they know them. And if I've seen a lot of Pizza Twist videos and then I go into their New Jersey location and that guy, I guess he has the bag on. So maybe this whole plan doesn't make sense. But if you could see who he was, it would be like a celebrity.
There are lots of videos where you can see who they are. So
okay.
Yeah, so you're right.
I was like, I'm spinning out because I didn't see a lot of these videos before you started writing the piece, but I think there's a parallel version that I watch a lot of videos in Spanish on social media. So I got a lot of videos of like family-run Mexican restaurants that it would be like an ocean wave crashing. And then it would cut to like a woman working at this restaurant getting a bucket of water thrown over her. And then she's like soaking wet and saying like, come to whatever, Valentina's Taqueria. And like that whole, have you seen like that version?
Yeah, I have seen it. Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Or it'll be like a car crash and then like it'll cut to her like lying on the ground. Like,
yeah. Yeah, and I sometimes feel like, well, I don't know exactly what, like, cinematic traditions that is pulling from, but I can say for the Indian ones, like, they are pulling from the melodrama of Bollywood. Like, those are the kinds of scenes that you see in a Bollywood movie, and like, in that sense, what is so cool about it is I think it genuinely, like, the hybridization of the online content does reflect the hybridization of the food too, and that is like the kind of positive spin on it, and like the kind of thing that's most exciting to me about it.
Yeah, I think in that sense, it does make it seem like it is speaking to a target audience, as of people who understand that context and who think it's fun to be riffing off of it.
Yeah, and like they would do things where they like will say like, come in for, I don't know, like if you tag this person, a person with this name, like they owe you a pizza, and they do lots of like Indian names. So I think in that way, it's also like cultivating a specific audience, like you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really special because, I have a name that's not common, and I have a whole childhood of walking past like the places that sell license plates, and like there's never an Eliza or a Vrinda license plate, probably. So if there's like a buy a pizza for Eliza and Vrinda video, like
yeah.
I'm sending that.
Exactly. Yeah. So in that sense, it's just like kind of fun. I don't know. I like it.
Yeah, I think both of these are really like fun, positive stories ultimately, which I think like there is so much viral online content that feels like it's, maybe not mean-spirited, but maybe not so earnest. And I think the tiramisu in unexpected places and the unexpected ways of marketing Indian pizza are both kind of like a wholesome story.
Yeah, I think so. It's fun to just like, it's fun to see people seeing themselves in a food, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a little bit of what I was saying of like, in some ways, maybe if you're like a purist, you might feel like, like the food coming second to all these other connotations might mean, like in the case of the creator, like the creator I interviewed for the piece, she always talks about how she like does things that make people feel weird. She won't season her food, or she'll break the pasta in half when you're not supposed to do that to boil it or whatever. And that might lead to food that doesn't taste as good, But at the same time, these other connotations of food that kind of take the foreground online, I think can be really cool. Like the way food can, like we're talking about with the Indian pizza, can represent a kind of hybridized lived experience, or the way like the person making it can represent an aspirational lifestyle, or just like a person you like to watch online, like
yeah.
I think that can just be a fun part of what food means, and for tiramisu, I think it can just really mean like a sense of escape, but also like I think it's a really communal food, and I think that's something people like about it is that it's like this big amount. You imagine it at a dinner table, and you're all taking a scoop together, like with your friends or whatever. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we're talking a lot about kind of viral online food things, but I feel like probably the way that you eat in your day-to-day life is a little bit more offline. And I'm curious if to close, you would want to maybe tell me a little bit about like where you've been enjoying to eat in New York lately, and if social media has impacted that at all. Totally.
Yeah. Eating for me, I would say the two biggest parts of it for me are like social. Like I love getting like a big group of people. I do honestly love going to the same place over and over for like someone's birthday. Like I like when someone has a tradition of going somewhere. And it's also very visual. Like I love like a beautiful backyard. And so I'm like always going to like Sergina because I love their backyard. My favorite restaurant in all of New York is Cafe Himalaya.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I like it there.
Yeah, I love it. I don't know why. There's never a wait, and the food is amazing. The momos are so good. And I just love the ambiance, and I like the people who go. I don't know. So I go there like for my birthday every year. I like everyone who's ever visited me in New York, I take there. But
what's your momo order?
I get the beef. And I get the beef momos, and I get them fried.
Ooh.
Yeah, they're really. And then I get rice, and you just like open it up on the rice, and the juices get on the rice. It's so good. So yeah, I think when I do find a place online, sometimes it's when it has like a funny visual angle. Like I was looking through my saved like restaurants or whatever, and I've been meaning to go to Time and Tide because they have that giant goldfish cracker. And I'm like, so those are the things that draw me in. But I do end up just going to my favorite places like Cafe Himalaya. I love Tibetan food. I go to Cafe Tibet in like South Brooklyn a lot.
Mm-hmm.
One of my friends, we go there every year for her birthday. And I did find one of my favorite restaurants ever via TikTok, actually. Kashgar Cafe. Have you ever been there? It's in Brighton Beach.
No, I haven't been, but I like Brighton Beach a lot.
It's so fun because you're it's like my favorite beach food place to go, and they have some of the best kebabs I've had like ever.
And you saw like a food person go there probably?
Yeah, I just like follow some like food TikTok account, and they were like, you have to check this place out. And I was like, okay, I definitely do. So
yeah, it's funny. Like it does work that way sometimes. Over the weekend, I went to a new Thai tea dessert place around like maybe 23rd Street. It's called Noir. Nuar, but whenever I read it, I think of like how Australian people say no.
No.
Yeah, you're braver than me. I was like, I'm not going to venture that. But I saw it on social media, and I was like, I don't know, this looks really beautiful. I hope it's actually good. And the Thai tea that I got was really good, but specifically the oat milk one was much better than the regular one. I don't know why, but that's my hot tip to you.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. Cool. Yeah, I think it can be hard with finding places online because like you're saying, it's like, is it going to actually be the way that it can be so easily misrepresented, and it's hard to like. Something I love about ambient, like I'm saying, I love like a beautiful backyard or whatever, but I also love I love going to a place. I love like Desi restaurants or like Afghan restaurants or Tibetan restaurants that feel like where all the like uncles are going to drink their chai, and that doesn't always get translated very well in a TikTok, or that's not even what most influencers are trying to capture.
Yeah, and then I think there's a flip of that, which is like I just saw a Subway take on Instagram that was like this white guy talking about how the best Chinese restaurants are the ones that like scare away white people. Like I think sometimes it flips over and people are like, if there's not a child working behind the counter, then it's not going to be good. Like the idea that it's so not made for Instagram, that makes it authentic. And I think I don't know. There's a wide variety of experiences you can have.
I agree. Yeah, I think that sometimes people go way too far. It becomes like a fetish of like wanting a specific kind of ethnic. Actually, something I mentioned in the pizza piece was that like people have this. They really want ethnic food to be cheap, and they want it to be like you're saying. They want it to be like a child is working behind the counter, and that's not fair. It's not. Yeah, we don't want that at all. And it's also not fair to like have a very specific and kind of fetishy idea of what the food is or what the culture is or whatever.
Yeah, but I do think to your point, there's something nice about being in a place that you know hasn't been built to attract a specific, very online audience, but like rather has been built to make really good food.
Yeah, exactly. And that people come to over and over, and I don't know, that people feel kind of at home in.
Yeah. Well, this has been so fun talking with you, and I can't wait for you to write some more stories for Taste so we can talk about them some more.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me. It's been so fun.
This is Taste is hosted and produced by Matt Rodbard and me, Eliza Barbanel. The show is edited by lead producer Clayton Gumber and supervised by Pat Stango, Director of Media Production and Development at Penguin Random House. Thanks to Shalia Harris and the production team at Penguin Random House. Theme music by Steve Rydell, logo and guest illustrations by Ellie Skurzat. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter to keep updated on all cool things in the world of taste.